Hi guys! Today I'm working on another tarot card. This one is the Hermit, and the Hermit represents soul searching and introspection, and basically looking within yourself to find answers. And I was excited to do this one. I initially had some ideas, but I wasn't quite sure exactly how I wanted to portray this concept and how much details I wanted to put into it. So yeah, it'll be fun to talk a bit about the concept of this piece and some of the things that I put into it, some of the things that didn't end up in the final and maybe I would have liked, but I think that's just the way that some things go, is that sometimes I think of ideas that would be great in my head, but they just don't quite come together in reality. And that's kind of where this piece ended up, is that it didn't quite have all of the elements that I was imagining in my head, but I'm happy with it, and I think it portrays what I wanted it to, the core concept of it. So anyways, let's talk about it. So in the more traditional Rider-Waite card deck, this card usually is represented with an old man wearing a hood, and he has a lantern, and that's about it. And there were some elements that I liked about it and some that I wanted to delve a little bit more into with the way that I portrayed it. So I have a character and he is separated from the outer world, which is what I intended to tell with this card. So I wanted him to be basically out in nature. I didn't want there to be any other like cities or buildings, not that I draw those very often anyways, but I didn't want there to be a hint that there was someone nearby. I wanted him to feel very isolated and separate. And I knew that I wanted to find some way to create like a barrier between him and then everything else in the piece, the outside of it. And this would be far more symbolic really than anything else. I just wanted it to represent a separation of outer world and inner world. This piece is actually going to be the exclusive print over on my Patreon for the print tier, so make sure to sign up by the last day of this month to get a print of him, and he will be part of the whole tarot deck card deck, which I'm very excited about, but this is the only way to get a print of him, so make sure to sign up. There's that link down in the description that'll take you over there, and it's the print tier, and if you do that you also get a pack of stickers for the month as well. And yeah, let's just continue talking about this piece. And originally I was thinking of having the character almost cocooned by first a layer of tree type shapes and line work, and then outside of that would be some form of like buildings or representations of civilization. And when I moved on from that, I was thinking maybe he would be cocooned in space, so he was really isolated. And then there were some variations between that where he would have space and then trees or something akin to that. So I was looking at a lot of different ways to represent this separate outer world and then him being contained within that, but separated. And some of those ideas, there was just a little bit too much going on to really condense it down in a way that I was happy with. And ultimately the core concept that I wanted was I wanted to emphasize his oneness and separation. I keep saying that, separation, but yes, I wanted him to feel like he was contained within himself. So I started thinking of other ways that I could create that barrier with more of an abstract shape. And I was thinking more about the lantern that he was holding in the original card, and I thought about having him hold a torch and then having not quite smoke, not quite fire. That's where it gets a little bit more imaginative, but a shape that came out of that torch that would surround him in some fashion and then spread out around it so that there's a little bit more chaos around him, but in this inner circle, it highlights him specifically. And that was where the finessing really came into play in this piece. I find that sometimes pieces just like click together like puzzle pieces that already exist and it just works. And sometimes I have to fuss with it a little bit more to make the composition feel like it's working together well. And this design element was the thing that I was working a little bit harder on. So originally I tried going in with more of an organic flowing shape so that it didn't actually create a specific circle shape around the character, around the hermit, but it was more organic. It had an odd shape to it. And I didn't think that it really created that barrier that I wanted. It didn't have that visual inside-outside separation, so I had to step away from it. It was just not quite working. It wasn't clicking together. I couldn't quite figure it out, so I stepped away from it for lunch, and I think a little bit after that. And that was so extremely helpful. I highly, highly recommend that if you're running into challenges with any of your pieces. It's very helpful to step away from it so you can look at it with some fresh eyes, or even just think about it. That's what helped me, is separating myself from the piece so that I wasn't looking at it and not actually thinking of solutions. I was almost just like muscle memory, chiseling things out, trying things, but not thinking it through. So I walked away from it and I was thinking about it still, and that's when it hit me that maybe I needed to first create a very geometric circle to create the border that I wanted, and then I could fill in the gaps of this smoke fire that connected to that circle and then spread out from there. And giving myself that really tangible, specific border helped so much. That was really the key to making it all come together, so I could control exactly where that was and where the eye was looking, and that was a nice breakthrough to make it finally feel like I was making some progress. And then it was just a lot of playing. That's one of the things I love about digital, is that I can just keep pushing and pulling and adding new layers. With this, I played with lightening the background a bit more so that he had a little bit more contrast, and eventually I actually ended up making him lighter, so he has a lighter hoodie and pants on, and that helps him separate a little bit more from the background. But I was also playing a lot with how much contrast and saturation I wanted for that special effect smoke fire, because I wanted it to be a key element and I wanted it to separate out from the background, but I also didn't want it to hog the spotlight over the character, the hermit. So that was something that I played a bit with. I played with masking out some areas so that it faded more, or just dropping the opacity down, or yeah, there's several different things that I tried out, and eventually I found a balance that I really liked so that it was still saturated and it had its presence there, but it wasn't overwhelming. I found that his skin just kept looking really saturated. When I had his dark hoodie, it didn't look quite so purple, but when I changed it to white, it actually ended up looking really saturated. So I did end up knocking it down. And that's one of those things that just looks different depending on what screen you're looking at or where it's presented. And I actually have two screens. I have my Cintiq and my monitor. So when I switch it over to my monitor, it's even more saturated. So I think this is going to be one where I'm going to have to send off a little test print on my own computer to tweak it to make sure that it looks correct. And I'll probably actually go back in and make sure that I bring the saturation of his skin down a bit so it's a little less fantasy looking. And one of the elements that I want to put more in this tarot deck is I want to have more animals and creatures that are present in the cards. I love drawing them. I love them, period. So I'm looking for more excuses and reasons to put those in. So I chose to give him a crow. I was really debating this on whether I wanted him to be a completely solitary character with no other forms of life on the card, but it just felt right. It felt settled and I liked it. So I decided to go ahead and let him keep his bird friend. I loved the challenge of working on this piece. It was a really interesting concept, and I love working through that sort of thing, a challenge that comes with the story of what I'm trying to draw and portray, and finding design elements that can tell that story. So this was just a really fun one because it was a bit of a challenge to work through that and to figure out. And it had me thinking about it when I wasn't working on this piece, which I love. It's really exciting to feel that immersed in a piece. Don't forget, he is the exclusive print of the month for my print tier over on Patreon. So if you'd like a print of him, make sure to sign up by the last day of this month. There's that link down in the description that'll take you over there. And eventually he'll be part of the tarot deck as a whole, but this is the only way that you can get a print of him. And yeah, that's about it for today. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my incredible patrons, and I'll see you guys next time.